It was the kind of family people envied. A decorated police officer, a devoted mother, a child who, despite his struggles, was loved beyond measure. To the outside world, the Graysons were the picture of stability, a model couple, a pillar of the community, the sort of people neighbors trusted to watch their houses when they were out of town, the sort of man parents encouraged their children to look up to. Malik Grayson wasn't just a cop. He was a hero. The newspapers loved him. He had led drug busts that cleaned up the streets. He mentored troubled youth, guiding them away from crime. He attended church every Sunday, shaking hands, praying with the congregation, reminding them that the law protected the good and punished the wicked. And his wife, Tashara, was the perfect complement to his life. She had been a promising social worker once, full of dreams of helping others. But when their son, Zir, was born with severe developmental disabilities, everything changed. He was nonverbal, trapped in a world where he could understand everything but say nothing. Tashara chose to stay home. She gave up her career, her ambitions, everything, because Zir needed her. And Malik, well, he provided, or at least that was the illusion, because behind the closed doors of their house, there were cracks. And Tashara, for years, had been too afraid to look too closely at them. Malik's shifts grew longer. At first, Tashara didn't question it. A cop's job was demanding. There were cases to solve, crime to fight. Some nights, he wouldn't come home until dawn. Others, he wouldn't come home at all. Over time, he would say, and she believed him. But even when he was home, he wasn't really there. His once warm embrace had grown cold. The easy laughter they used to share had vanished, replaced with short, sharp answers, a distance she couldn't reach through. Zir noticed it too. The boy, despite his inability to speak, sensed things. When Malik walked through the door, Zir would tense. He would cling to his mother's side, small fingers curling into the fabric of her shirt. And Malik, he barely looked at his own son anymore. Tashara told herself it was stress. That Malik had a lot on his shoulders. That he was just tired. But there was something else. Something deeper. And deep down, she knew it. It was a Thursday night. Malik had texted her earlier in the evening. Working late. Don't wait up. She had planned on spending the evening watching movies with Zir. Her son loved animations, even if he couldn't laugh the way other children did. He would tap her arm excitedly when something funny happened, eyes shining with joy. But that night, Zir had been restless. He wouldn't sit still. He kept looking toward the door, his small hands frantically signing. Something Tashara didn't understand. He was trying to tell her something, but she didn't know what. Eventually, he had fallen asleep, and Tashara, exhausted, decided to run a quick errand before bed. Just a trip to the pharmacy for Zir's medication. It shouldn't have taken more than 20 minutes. When she came back home, she immediately felt it. Something was wrong. The house was too quiet. Even for a home where silence was normal, this silence felt unnatural. She set the pharmacy bag down slowly. Listened. A sound. Movement. Coming from Zir's room. Her stomach twisted. He was supposed to be asleep. She walked toward the door, heart pounding. Something felt off. Then she heard it, a rustling noise, a shift of fabric, a breath. She pushed the door open, and what she saw shattered her world. Malik, standing over their son, his pants undone. Zir lay motionless on the bed, his wide, terrified eyes locked on his father. For a moment, time stopped. Tashara's mind refused to process what she was seeing. Then rage, a burning, uncontrollable fury. She screamed and lunged at Malik, her fists flying. She hit him, hard, again. She didn't care about the pain in her knuckles, the burning in her lungs. She had to protect her son, but Malik was stronger. With one brutal shove, he sent her crashing into the dresser. Pain exploded down her spine, but she didn't stop. She pushed forward, screaming, clawing at him. Then, his hands closed around her throat. Tight, crushing, her vision blurred. "You should have never come home," Malik whispered. It was the last thing she heard before everything went black. When Tashara woke up, she was on the floor, disoriented, dizzy, her throat raw. She couldn't remember what happened at first. Then she saw the blood. On her hands. On the sheets. On her son. Zir lay there. Still. Too still. Her breath caught. No, no, no. She tried to crawl toward him, but before she could reach him, rough hands grabbed her. Ma'am, step back. Police. Officers filled the room. Flashing lights. Voices shouting. Boots pounding against the floor. What was happening? Then she saw him. Malik, standing in the doorway, unharmed. His uniform crisp. His hands on his head, in a show of grief and disbelief. But in his eyes, something cold. Then he spoke. She lost it, he said, his voice shaking with carefully crafted sorrow. Tashara froze. I tried to stop her, Malik continued, wiping fake tears from his face. But she just kept stabbing him. The officers exchanged glances. They believed him. Tashara shook her head. No, no. She opened her mouth to scream the truth, but her voice was weak, drowned out by the officer reading her rights. By the time the news broke, the story had already been decided. Ohio cop's wife suffers breakdown, kills disabled son in murder-suicide attempt. Tashara was painted as a monster, the grieving father, the dedicated officer, the poor broken man who had lost both his wife and child in one tragic night. And Tashara, the unhinged mother. They pointed to her medical records, her past struggles with dissociation and depression. They didn't ask why a woman who had spent 13 years caring for her son, fighting for him, loving him, would suddenly kill him in cold blood. They didn't question why Malik had left Zir alone with her if she was so unstable, because Malik was one of them, and Tashara was just another case file, a story already written before she ever had a chance to speak. They called her delusional. They called her unstable. They said she had lost her mind. The world believed Malik's lie without hesitation. Within hours of her arrest, the media had already built their narrative. It was airtight. A devoted police officer had lost his disabled son to a mentally unwell wife. The evidence, as far as they were concerned, was damning. A mother suffering from stress. A history of dissociative episodes. A tragic and unfortunate crime. Tashara sat in the cold interrogation room, her wrists bruised from the handcuffs, her head still foggy from Malik's attack. But no one cared about the bruises on her neck. Instead, they asked the same question over and over. Why did you do it? No one asked about Malik. No one wondered why he was unharmed. No one even considered that the real monster was the one wearing a badge. Because who would question a cop? Tashara never stood a chance. Her trial was a formality, not a pursuit of justice. The prosecution painted her as a woman who had snapped under pressure, a mother who, after years of caring for a disabled son, had finally broken. They read out her therapy records, highlighting every moment of struggle, every time she had ever admitted to feeling exhausted or overwhelmed. Not once did they ask why a mother who had spent her entire life protecting her child would suddenly kill him. Malik played his role to perfection. He sat on the stand, dressed in his crisp uniform, voice trembling as he recounted the horrific night. I tried to stop her, he whispered, voice cracking at just the right moment. I never thought she would actually do it. The jury sympathized with him. A man who had lost a son. A father betrayed by the woman he trusted. Tashara wasn't just found guilty. She was destroyed. While the world moved on, while the headlines shifted to new tragedies, Malik continued living his double life. The predator who had stolen his son's life walked free. He received sympathy from neighbors. His colleagues treated him like a fallen hero. They invited him for drinks, encouraged him to take time off, praised his strength for enduring such a tragedy. No one suspected a thing. But behind closed doors, Malik's darkness thrived. He had been careful for years. Every crime, every sin, documented. His phone held evidence of his true nature. Photos, videos, sick trophies. Malik recorded everything. For months, he continued living his normal life. But the arrogance of a man who believes he is untouchable is often his downfall. And Malik was about to make a mistake. A mistake that would bring his world crashing down. It was supposed to be routine. Another night, another secret file transfer. Malik had done this 100 times, backing up his videos, his records, ensuring no one would ever find his darkest secrets. But this time he slipped. Instead of transferring the file to his private, encrypted server, he uploaded it to social media. For exactly 12 minutes, the video sat there untouched, unnoticed. Then someone saw it, saved it, and the internet exploded. At first, people didn't believe it. The footage was too horrific, too sickening. No one wanted to accept that the grieving father, the respected cop, the victim of this tragedy was actually the real monster. But then came the verifications, the frame-by-frame analysis, the confirmation that the video was real, that it had come directly from Malik's own device. And suddenly, the world turned. The same headlines that had painted Tashara as a deranged mother now scrambled to correct themselves. The public was outraged. The police forced distance themselves. The community that once adored him now wanted his head on a platter. But Malik was already gone. For 2 years, Tashara sat in prison, labeled as a child murderer. For 2 years, the world believed she was a woman who had snapped and killed her own son. For 2 years, she endured shackles, whispered insults, the cold isolation of a cell. And then in a single night, everything changed. The video spread like wildfire. People who had once called her a monster were now demanding her freedom. How could the justice system have gotten it so wrong? How had a grieving mother been locked away while the real killer walked free? Authorities had no choice. The same people who had thrown her into a cage now rushed to release her, not because they cared, but because the world was watching. Malik knew it was over. His name was plastered on every screen, every news station, every phone, a monster exposed. And so he ran. He abandoned his house, left his belongings behind. He vanished into the shadows. For 2 years, he stayed ahead of them. He knew the tricks, how to cover his tracks, how to disappear. But no one runs forever. It happened in the most ordinary way. A gas station in New Mexico. A tired clerk behind the counter. A man, unkempt, unshaven, anxious, his head down, his hands trembling as he counted out cash. Something about him felt off. The clerk didn't realize who he was until after the man had left. But by then it was too late. The call had already been made. And within hours, authorities were closing in. The motel door crashed open. There was no fight, no dramatic last stand. Malik was found alone, gaunt, pale, a shell of the man he once was. The predator who had once controlled everything was now nothing more than a pathetic fugitive. When they dragged him out in handcuffs, there were no cameras, no speeches, no one left to defend him, because there was nothing left to say. The trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming. The judge looked him in the eyes and said the words that would bury him forever. You do not deserve freedom, and you will never know it again. Life without parole. The last time Tashara saw him was in that courtroom. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, she saw it. Fear. For the first time in his life, Malik Grayson was afraid, and that was the only justice she would ever get. Tashara stepped out of prison, but the world didn't feel real anymore. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. People apologized. But she didn't hear any of it, because Zir was still gone. No amount of justice could change that. No amount of anger, regret, or sorrow could bring her son back. She had been freed from one prison, but left with another. Because how do you live with the knowledge that the system that was meant to protect you nearly destroyed you? How do you move on from knowing that the world would have let you die for a lie? She didn't have an answer. All she knew was that she had survived. And sometimes survival was the only justice she could get. The lesson left behind. The world moved on. New scandals. New tragedies. But this case left something behind. A lesson that the justice system doesn't always seek truth. That the people meant to protect us aren't always the heroes we think they are. That monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they wear badges. Sometimes they sit in your living room. Sometimes they're the ones you love the most. And when that happens, the question is never how deep their evil runs. The real question is, who will believe you when you finally see the truth?